Hey guys, and welcome back to the MLB DFS Slate Rundown. It's Friday, August 7th, 2020. We're talking MLB DFS, both DraftKings and FanDuel. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Hey guys, and welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Welcome back to the channel here on YouTube. As always, thank you for taking the time to click on this video, find this channel. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We're posting endless videos every single day during MLB season, talking DFS here, both DraftKings and FanDuel. Specifically, most of this pricing, most of what I will talk about will be based off FanDuel, so keep that in mind. But I will talk about pricing for DraftKings, and a lot of the same analysis does apply to both. If you've been with us over the past couple of days, this week's been pretty good in terms of our picks. Some of our pitchers and stacks all went off on particular nights. Last night was a little bit of a disappointment. Played a lot of Tyler Chatwood. You would have been disappointed. A guy that just got absolutely mauled. A good pitcher in Kansas City, but a pretty weak Kansas City offense. Nonetheless, some of our other picks, such as Keller, did very, very well, and in the stacks we did choose from did well last night. But we are on to a new night here. It's Friday. We have a larger main slate here, 13 total games. Keep in mind there's been a number of postponements over the past couple of weeks. One in particular tonight that's going to affect this slate. You really only have 12 games to pick from. The one tonight that is postponed, that's Chicago Cubs at St. Louis. Obviously COVID related. So just keep in mind that game is not in play, even though players are available on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Some pitchers do remain on a pitch count, so pay attention as you pick your pitchers. That's obviously not a good thing if you run into a guy that's only going to get 60 or 70 pitches. You might not get a W, you might not get a quality start. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So just because a guy's in a good spot, make sure that guy is going to get a full length outing if you're going to choose him, especially for the more expensive guys. This slate is loaded with below average pitchers. I'll be perfectly honest with you. A lot of good, high, above 5.0 projected runs for stacks tonight, facing a lot of bad pitchers in a lot of good situations for bats. There aren't very many pitchers to pick from. I have a narrow interest on actual pitchers that I do want to start. And as I mentioned, because of those high run totals and below average pitchers, we have several attractive stacks to pick from. Last thing I want to mention here, I talked about in our last video, and that's the abnormal schedule. Is this affecting starting pitching? It could be. Let's see how the season plays out, but I think it's an interesting question. If you have any thoughts on that, leave me a comment down below. But a lot of these guys are used to regular interval rest days, 4 or 5 rest days, pitching on the 5th day typically, so it could be affecting them. But again, like to hear your comments on that down below. Moving on to the 13-game slate here, really a 12-game slate, as I mentioned. These are the games of particular interest, the 12 that are happening tonight, excluding that St. Louis game. A lot of things to pay attention to here. The green are the highlighted, higher projected teams, with the Dodgers being the highest at 5.55 runs projected. This video is coming out a little bit later than I wanted to on Friday, but it is too early to know lineups, so these will fluctuate a little bit, but keep that in mind. The Dodgers are at 5.55, the highest projected. But a lot of other interesting ones here. Boston, whether you want to trust them yet, haven't looked too good out of the gate, but they are projected at 5.26, the second highest overall on the slate. You have Toronto, an odd team there, at 5.24, Minnesota 5.24, Atlanta over 5, and the Angels over 5 also. In terms of the other side of the coin, Texas, San Francisco, and Miami all projected less than 4 runs. Pretty surprising. Miami's been playing very, very well for them to be projected such a low 3.96 total. But in terms of picking pitchers and where you want to go with your pitchers, keep those lower scores in mind. It's also one of the first nights that we really need to consider weather. There's a couple games in particular that are of concern for rain, and that's Atlanta at Philadelphia and Miami at New York Mets. Both those games are dealing with the same issue, pretty much the same weather pattern, the same everything, the same rain pretty much, considering those two cities are pretty close to one another, Philadelphia and New York. But those games, very, very risky right now to take pitchers from, somewhat risky to take bats from. I do like the Atlanta bats, unfortunately. Talk about a couple of those guys, I'll highlight them. But in general, these games are a legitimate concern tonight, so pay attention to those keys on the right-hand side there. Follow Kevin Roth on Twitter. Really, really excellent source. I mention it every single week. But up until lineup lock, make sure you're not getting exposed to games that are that high of risk. And keep in mind these weather situations do change. In terms of a chance of rain, other games here: Detroit at Pittsburgh, Toronto at Boston, and Minnesota at Kansas City. All those games do have a slight chance of rain. Pretty much predicted that these games will go on. Whether they get delayed is a question. Very, very unlikely that they will get actually postponed. So where are we heading tonight? In terms of pitching, I'm down to 2 guys. I always list 2 guys here for you, but 2 guys in particular might not have exposure to anybody else but these 2, and that's Trevor Bauer and Julio Urias, if I pronounce that correctly. Both these pitchers are up there in price, so the bats I will give you, will keep that in mind. I'll try to get you some value bats in there, but it's hard for me to go anywhere else, especially with Trevor Bauer on the mound tonight. 11-4 on FanDuel, 10-6 on DraftKings. One of the most expensive pitchers over the last couple of nights available to us. He's on the road pitching in in Milwaukee. Not something I love to do is take a pitcher on the road, but Milwaukee projected 4.2 runs, so not that high, not one of the below 14, but certainly something we can work with here. Trevor Bauer is really the only clear-cut elite arm on this slate. He's pitched really, really well over the last couple of years. You can say he's inconsistent. I can agree with that. But when he's in a good spot, which I think he's in tonight, he can really dominate. Over the 2 starts of this season, 2020 so far, he's averaged 6+ innings, 10 Ks each game. He has 20 total Ks in 2 starts. So the guy can really rack it up and strike guys out. 29+% K rate, nearly 30% in 2019. It's much higher currently in 2020. Obviously, that'll normalize here soon. But in terms of a K guy, he can really rack those Ks up, especially against teams like Milwaukee that do strike out a lot with a lot of right-handed bats. He's the highest projected at the moment with 7.5 Ks on the night. 2019, he averaged 52 fantasy on the road. So that's one reason I'm okay with taking Trevor Bauer on the road. He's an odd guy. I can't debate that. He's a weird dude, gets in a lot of Twitter feuds and everything else. But in terms of pitching on the road, 52 fantasy he averaged last year. And that kind of makes sense. Cincinnati is a hitter's park. But Cincinnati here is a road favorite. So again, something I do really like. Milwaukee has lost a lot of players, whether it's due to injury. Lorenzo Cain is sitting out, even though he started this with COVID, sitting out in terms of he just does not want to play. So there's a lot of situations, a lot of weird things. They do have Yelich. He's a very, very dangerous bat. But outside of that, Milwaukee's not really loaded, and their best bats are probably right-handed bats that play favorite split. Milwaukee bottom 5 here, MLB and WOBA, ISO, WRC plus versus right-handers in 2020. Limited sample size, but keep that in mind. They're not hitting very well at the moment in 2020, and they have a 29% strikeout rate in 2020. That's number 2 in all of baseball versus right-hand. So again, a good situation here. Trevor Bauer is clear cut, probably higher owned in terms of ownership pitcher tonight. But he's the guy I'll be sticking with in most of my lineups. Trying to spend a couple bucks less, nearly $2-3 grand less. You can go to Julio Urias here at $8,100 on FanDuel, $9,800 on DraftKings. Much better price on FanDuel in my opinion. Pitching at home for Los Angeles against the San Francisco Giants, a team just in general. This is all about facing San Francisco, a team in general that's not very good, doesn't have a lot of quality bats, a lot of older players in that lineup. San Francisco projected at 3.45 runs. Not very good. Very few teams get projected less than 4. This clearly is one of them. He's a slight, as I mentioned, salary relief off of Bauer. Helps you get a couple more bats in. He always offers a safe, solid floor. Keep in mind, though, he doesn't have much upside. He has a limited K percentage. Guy strikes out 4 or 5 guys per outing. Nothing special. Doesn't give up a ton of home runs. He's a ground ball pitcher. Just a very quality type of pitcher that can need up some innings here. His pitch count has increased to 90 in the last game. So again, I'm not worried about him not lasting throughout a game. He should be in that 90 to 100 typical starting pitcher pitch count range. So we should get a full game out of him. Los Angeles Dodgers, they're the heaviest Vegas favorite tonight. I think he has like a 70% chance of, or the Dodgers have a 70% chance of winning, meaning he is in line not only for a quality start, but also getting the W. All things that can help make up for the fact that he does not strike out a lot of people. San Francisco, I mentioned, very, very weak lineup. In 2020 so far, 310 WOBA, 140 ISO, and a 22% K rate. Just all average to below average numbers so far this year. No real danger in taking Julio Urias tonight. He's not in a bad spot by any means, but he does have limited upside. I think he's a safe option, especially for cash game. The other guy I'll be considering at pitcher tonight. Moving on to some of the bats I particularly like tonight, Friday night. The first guy I got to mention here, I think he's just severely underpriced. He hasn't done much this year. He's been slow out of the gate, but that's Andrew Benintendi. $2,600 on FanDuel is absolutely criminal for him. He's a guy that continuously is over $3,500, $4,000 on both sites in previous years, 2019. He's a part of that Boston lineup that did lose Mookie Betts, but nonetheless, he's always been a quality left-handed bat and is severely criminally underpriced right now. But he's playing at home versus Toronto versus a right-hander in Trevor Roark. Boston is projected 5.26 runs. Whether or not you believe in that or not is a question. Very slow out of the gate. I can agree with that. Really high projection for them, in my opinion. They're facing Toronto at home. But if you want to go off Vegas, good spot for Boston. And the thing here is, Andrew Benintendi leads off. He's the number one leadoff hitter for that team. Always is, always has been. And that's a good spot for him to be in, considering he's only $2,600 and in a good spot versus this right-hander in Roark. Boston, I mentioned, one of the highest run totals. Again, just playing into that. Batting leadoff with a split advantage. Career versus righties, 350 WOBA, 116 WRC plus, and 177 ISO. I'm not saying he has all the power in the world, but he's a guy that does mash and hit right-handed pitchers very well over the course of the career. So a good spot here. And then on the flip side, the pitcher he's facing versus left-handers, 364 WOBA, 536 xFIP, and 1.7 hums per nine. So a guy that's just not very good versus left-handed bats. I love Andrew Benintendi tonight. Could approach 100% ownership across all my lineups. $2,600. That's pretty much the point here. I don't care if they were projected 3 runs tonight. At $2,600, Andrew Benintendi leading off for Boston versus a right-handed pitcher. I'm taking that every single night. You guys should. Sticking with the guy I had listed in our other major in-depth on last Wednesday, Max Kepler here, $3,700. Price has gone up a little bit on FanDuel for good reason. $4,300 on DraftKings. Playing in Kansas City. Yes, it is at Pitcher's Park, but I still like Kepler tonight. I still like a lot of the Minnesota guys. Facing Junis here, who's a right-hander. Minnesota also projected over 5 runs, 5.24 projection. Great split matchup. He's on fire so far in 2020. He's averaging 15 fantasy per game versus right-handers. That's Kepler. Typically leading off for Minnesota, a team that can just pound the ball, hit home runs, set records last year, a team that can really generate offense. You got to love that at $3,700. Another advantage of Kepler playing on the road, unlike Benintendi, he has that leadoff road extra bat advantage. Very good chance if you're a leadoff batter on a road team, you can get 5 total at-bats. That one extra at-bat is a huge advantage. You gotta look for those things, and Max Kepler gives you that tonight. He has a solid history also versus 6 for 18, 333 average, 3 extra base hits, 1 home run, and 2 RBI. So Kepler has seen this guy a little bit. He has had some success versus him already. And then on the flip side, the pitcher himself, 351 WOBA, 424 xFIP. He's giving up a 44% hard hit rate and 1.28 home runs per 9. And that's 2 left-handers. But keep in mind, he pitches half of his games in Kansas City, one of the best pitchers' parks in all of MLB. So those numbers are probably weighted down a little bit because of where he pitches most of his games. I just think it's a great spot for Max Kepler. I'm still sticking the train with 2 other guys I want to mention here. Again, trying to save you guys some money because I really think you should try to fit Bauer into your lineups. And if you're going to do that, I can't give you Mike Trouts and all the most expensive guys in the world. Obviously, play them if you can. If they fit into your lineups and those guys fit in, the models tonight, sure, play them. But in general, we got to find some money. We got to save some money on our bats. I love Jock Peterson here. $3,100 on FanDuel, $41 on DraftKings. Much better price on FanDuel. At home, we talked about his pitcher, also obviously in that same game, facing San Francisco at home. Jeff Samardzija on the mound, the former Notre Dame dual great wide receiver / pitcher, played for the Cubs for a number of years. Jeff Samardzija, the right-hander. But the Dodgers here, they're looking to destroy him. 5.55 projected runs, the highest on the board tonight. The most projected runs coming from the Dodgers themselves. He's a value salary, in my opinion, at this $3,100 price tag on FanDuel. Hopefully he'll lead off for the Dodgers. He has led off a lot versus righties in the past. He did it a couple times this year already. Right now, though, he's typically hitting 6 or 7. So either way, I like him. Hopefully, like I mentioned, he's leading off. That's even better here. Again, highest projected runs per the Dodgers here. Jock Peterson himself, career 364 WOBA, 131 WRC plus, and 266 ISO. He also has a 13%, which is a very solid percent walk rate versus right-handers. All good numbers here. We know the guy can hit. He's slow out of the gates this year. Most people are. It's 2020. It's a weird season. But we've seen him in the home run derby. The dude can just derby. He can hit the ball, and he can hit the ball far. I like Jock Peterson a lot here. Slow start, I mentioned, out of 2020. Coming off, though, a 2-for-4 performance the other night with 2 home runs, 5 RBIs. Totaling 54 FanDuel in terms of fantasy points. So again, this guy can really, when he gets a hold of him, this dude has a multi-homer potential, and that's exactly what we're looking for at $3,100. Jeff Samardzija, on the other hand, for San Francisco, the right-hander, he's not the pitcher of old. He hasn't been for a few years now. He's just getting old. 313 WOBA, 5.6 xFIP, 47% fly ball rate, 40% hard hit rate, and giving up 1.76 home runs per 9. A guy that's from 2019 till now. That's a guy that pitches in San Francisco, another heavy favorable pitcher's park half the time. Now playing in LA, it's a pretty neutral park, but again, just not good numbers, and Jock Pete is favorable in that matchup for sure, that left on right matchup. Another guy you can save a ton of money here on, and that's $2,100 Joe Adell for the Los Angeles Angels. He's $3,600 on DraftKings. You're looking at bare minimum basically on FanDuel. Playing in Texas, facing Jordan Lyles, a right-hander, former Pittsburgh Pirate, not a great pitcher, very below average. Los Angeles Angels tonight projected over 5 at 5.07 projected runs. Value salary, as I mentioned, at $2,100. Likely batting 7th. This kid is new. He's only had a couple of games under his belt. He was injured. I'll talk about that at the end here. But this is one of the Angels. No, this is the Angels' top prospect. He's actually MLB's number 6 overall prospect. 5-tool player, great player, can do it all. Has shown some raw power in his minor league days. Really quickly advanced through the minor leagues. He's only 20 or 21, but in general, he's fitting into an incredible stack of bats. If you're talking about Justin Upton, Albert Pujols is old, but the dude can still hit. You have Mike Trout, obviously, Ohtani. I'm missing somebody. Rendon. There's just a number. It's just a loaded lineup. He slides perfectly in there. He doesn't have to worry about anything. He doesn't have to stress out of being the top guy in that lineup. They are my favorite stack of the night. That's the Angels. High run total. Great hitters park in Texas, and it's hot in Texas. It's like 96 to 100 degrees. When that place heats up, man, the ball flies in Texas. Lyles for Texas, the right-hander. He's average, as I mentioned, at best, with a 4.0 xFIP and 1.4 home run per 9 versus righties. The only thing I'd mention here is watch the injury designation. He injured his hamstring. They said it would only be a day. He missed the last game. But again, you don't need like 40 points out of this guy. We're looking to save some money. He's going to get you $2,100 exposure to a high projected run total LA stack versus a pretty bad pitch. That's all you need. It's going to help you fit in your more expensive bats and the guys you want at pitchers such as Bauer. And so what stacks are we looking at specifically? First and foremost, my favorite stack. I just talked about it, the Los Angeles Angel. I don't know why the Angels got whited out there, but obviously it's the Angels here. It's an elite right-handed lineup that fares well versus right-handed pitcher. It's pretty much the name of the game here. Jordan Lyles just is not good. He's a right-hander. You want lefty, sure, but this lineup in particular, Trout, Upton, and Rendon, those guys hit righties. Upton in particular hits righties better than he hits lefties, so you don't have to worry about a split matchup or anything like that. This team is just absolutely loaded and playing them a lot, and they can go off low-owned later in the night. It's just things I love about the Angels here. Lyles, Texas, right-hander. I talked about him a little bit with Adell. Struggles versus lefties, but weak across the board. 2019, 4.61 xFIP, 1.60 home run per 9, and that's in general, just versus lefties and righties combined. Texas ballpark, talked about it. Hot weather, great offense, and that's what you're dealing with in Texas. The other stack here lines up with Jock Peterson. Hopefully he's batting leadoff, but in general, I do love the Los Angeles Dodgers tonight. They're the highest projected run total on the board. I think it's still 5.55 total projected runs for the Dodgers. Late night lineup could help. I mean, I don't even know if it's released right now, but it could help with ownership. It sometimes does. One of the reasons why I like late stacks. It could see lower ownership just because people aren't sure who's in that lineup, but they are loaded. Absolutely loaded with left-handed power. They have a huge split advantage here versus Jeff Samardzija at home. Jeff Samardzija, I talked about him a little bit already. He has a very, very rough history with several Los Angeles Dodgers bats. A lot of those guys, they have actual numbers against him. Very, very good numbers, hitting well over 300. Samardzija in 2019, 5.02 xFIP, 1.39 home runs per 9, just generally versus lefties and righties combined. And in 2020 so far, the numbers are just getting worse. The guy's getting not very good. By the way, their bullpen is also horrendous. Very, very bad bullpen. So even if you lose Samardzija, you're not running into a traditional, very good bullpen of San Francisco. You're running into a weak one, as a matter of fact. But so far, Samardzija in 2020, he's pitched 2 games, 9 innings, has given up 10 earned runs and 11 hits. Again, a 5.55 team projected total here. Love the Dodgers. It's very, very hard to ignore them. Hoping that because they're out later, that the game's later and all of that, the lineup will get released later and people will have lower owned with Dodgers players in particular. And so that kind of wraps up my main plays, my stacks, my pitchers, and my one-off bats. But there are some other highlights. Obviously, that's not everyone. I only gave you four players to the bats. If you want to get a little different in pitching, Matt Boyd, pitcher for Detroit, playing on the road, which isn't ideal in Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh just really bad on offense. So he's not my favorite pitcher in the world, but you can save a couple bucks and face a pretty weak offense in a pitcher's park also. And then Griffin Canning, if you want to get risk and play the LA pitcher here, he's pitching in Texas. The only thing I don't like is the fact that Texas really, regardless of what offense is in that town or in that stadium at the time, in that ballpark, the ball does fly when it's hot late in the summer. So you can take a chance here. He seems to have pitched well so far in 2020. Other guys I want to mention here, Toronto, they have a lot of runs projected for them tonight. It's very odd, but Rowdy Tellez, if I pronounce that correctly, a first baseman for Toronto. He's a pretty value that can get you exposure to that lineup. Cesar Hernandez for Cleveland, second baseman, has been leading off or hitting second and playing very, very well for Cleveland. A good guy here, another value. You can get a switch hitter. Nick Markakis, Atlanta. Just keep in mind that game could possibly get postponed, rained out. A lot of things could happen there. He's getting some exposure due to injuries to that outfield of Atlanta. So Markakis, always a good left-handed at bat, but certainly moving up to, I think, 5th or 6th in that lineup could do him wonders here, get some more exposure. Other stacks I would consider tonight: the Boston Red Sox, Minnesota Twins, and lastly here, the Seattle Mariners. And so that kind of wraps it up. That's what we're dealing with in terms of our stacks, the plays I would play tonight, and where my head is headed, where our heads in terms of MLB DFS. Hope you guys enjoy this. I hope these videos are helpful. Keep in mind, actually tonight there isn't enough time. I typically put the main slate pitcher breakdown guide down below. I didn't do that. I'll make sure I do that for one other night, weekend, hopefully Saturday or Sunday. So I owe you guys that. But check down below Daily Fantasy Nerd Optimizer. It's the optimizer I use. It's very useful. You can literally click generate lineup with that, and you have a chance in cash games. It's that accurate. I do love it. If you wait until lineups get really, especially, all of the different stuff gets updated. So if you're not using an optimizer, if you want to use the optimizer I use to help put together these lineups, these videos, check down below for a link to Daily Fantasy Nerd. I believe you get the first month or so for free. And so that really wraps it up. As always, thank you guys so much for hanging in here with me, listening to these videos. They're really fun to put together. I've had a blast with MLB DFS so far. Leave me some comments down below if I've missed anything. We're only covering 6-8 guys here. There's a lot more. There's a lot of different ways tonight can play out, so leave me some comments down below. As always, please, if you want to help support the channel, the easiest thing you have to do, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to give an email. You don't have to donate money. All you have to do is like this video and make sure you are subscribed. Other than that, I wish you the best of luck tonight, and I will catch you video.